to the agenda?
I don't have anything.
Awesome. Then can I have an approval for the agenda? DG, second, Christine, all in favor? Passed unanimously. Adoption of the minutes. Does anyone need a couple minutes to go over them? Okay. Can
I
have-
wasn't there. Yeah, I wasn't there, so.
Okay. Give a couple minutes for that. And maybe while we're waiting, I will officially say welcome back, Bonny. Thank you very much for coming back and
I know when we see Carla.
Yes.
Doing more up and above,
And I wanted to thank Carla as well. She's done a great job this last year. We all appreciate it. You good? We need more time? All right. Could I have someone move that the minutes of the Parks Trail Greenways Advisory Committee meeting held September 17th, 2019 be adopted? Ben, can I have a second? Terry, all in favor? Motion carried unanimously. And there is no one from the public. Action items. So here we go. Now I can't just flip a page.
Oh. Okay, can I do it?
I'm here, but yeah, that'd be good.
Councillor Fass asked the Bonny Conservancy about the connector trail at Quarry Park viewpoint and proposed a joint walkabout of the area with BITS and the Conservancy.
Do we have anybody here who's a member of the Bonny Conservancy on this committee at the moment?
I'm a member.
You're a member? Member, but not on the board?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, not on the board.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just said member.
So ongoing?
This is a, well, you see, this is from April, and we've tried this a few times over the years. I think we should, at this point, with Bonny just back, let's see if it ends up on our work plan. Now we have a new parks plan in front of us, and I've made various efforts over the years. Sometimes one group comes and the other group doesn't, or whatever. Not the Trail Society, and I'll talk about this in my update. How about that?
Okay, so
Yeah.
ongoing.
Ongoing.
Councillor Fast, or Councillor Fast, email maps to the group, email for committee information, and then Carla will put it to the folder.
Yeah,
That's just an ongoing.
What is this folder? Can we find them? Because I emailed you a couple of things, but I've got more.
Yeah, so what we decided, I think we talked about it more in the last meeting, is that Steph and I had created just a folder that
Is
could
internal.
access all the maps, but it's
Staff
internal.
can? Yeah.
So what we were gonna do instead is we were gonna actually post them on the website in these accordion type things that you can put at the bottom of the webpage, so
Yeah.
you can kind of just click on a little arrow thing that
Oh,
says
great.
map, like the Parks and Trails maps, and then we can have them links to all of them in there.
Great.
So as you send them to us,
Right.
we can then add them to that, and then if there were any that were not for public
Right.
eyes, then we could maybe put them on the list, but not have a link to them, and then if we need them, they'll be in that same folder. So we
Right.
have both of those on are
We can see
accessible.
it, like,
At least at the meeting, it would be accessible.
Like a catalog. Yeah.
Yeah, so, because we talked about that, we didn't want to have you going through your big giant maps every single time,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. And then I always have these things on the action list, and it's like, didn't I do that already? Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. I'll
So,
put it
yeah,
back
as
on.
you find them,
As
as
soon
you
maps
find
to
them,
Carla.
just keep
Okay.
sending them.
So no, don't send them to Carla. Do you want to send them to the whole committee? Because that's, everyone in the
Okay.
committee wants to see it.
Right.
And then Carla and I will flag that as,
Right.
and we'll do our actions from there.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
We include the coastal referral for toolkit.
Yeah.
Did we include that, Carla? Is it in the folder? I can't remember.
I don't know.
I'll send that too.
Sorry.
Okay.
Oh my God, poor Sue Ellis. She missed a bunch of
Missed a
meetings.
few meetings.
Yeah.
Contact the Community Foundation regarding the Maggie Cummings Fund.
Just this,
Pursue implementation and restoration strategy.
I'm going to talk about this in my update.
Okay, so it's done?
No.
No, ongoing, okay. And Same thing, maps. We're done.
Okay?
Yes.
Thanks.
Sorry, thanks.
Sorry. Okay, council referrals. 5.1, active design guidelines. Emma.
Okay, so this is a referral from council. They're a set of design guidelines.
Page 11, the guidelines.
Yes, they're included in your agenda package for your review. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a quick look through them. They're meant to be very easy to use, engaging, a lot of graphics, going specific photographs, and pretty simple language. Just to give a little background on the project, it came out of the transportation plan that was adopted last year, 2018, and it is one of the high priority elements out of this plan to develop design guidelines to encourage active transportation and new development on the island. And when we talk about active transportation, we're talking about ways of getting around that are essentially human-powered, most well known as walking and cycling, also includes transit and any other types of human-powered mobility.
And horsepower.
And horsepower, yes. Human-powered, horsepower. So active transportation is an integral part of a broader concept called active living. And this refers to incorporating physical activity into your daily routine, including how you commute, how you move around inside and outside of buildings, as well as spending time outdoors, which has been shown to really encourage and facilitate more physical activity. Now, the intentional design of the built environment to encourage and facilitate active living in your community is called active design. It's a design approach that's been around for quite some time now, at least a decade, and it started, I believe, in Miami. But it's a North American concept, and it's gaining a lot of traction because of the health benefits, the social and mental well-being aspects of active living. And that has become the subject of the guidelines you see here. And they're meant to, if you've had a chance to see them right at the beginning, it tells you who the audience is for these guidelines. It's meant to help encourage developers to consider more active design in their developments specific to Bowen, as well as educate the greater community on what active design means, active living, and how you can incorporate that into your lifestyle through the built environment. I'm going to run through the guidelines just really briefly, and then we can have a more in-depth discussion. The design guidelines are broken down into the three main stages of development. That's planning, subdivision, and building. At the planning stage, we're talking about the more high-level conceptual configuration of land uses and where they're located with respect to your circulation patterns, your street grid, your trails, and different networks. And just listed the various guidelines that are in the document under planning. And these guidelines are really, as I mentioned, higher level, more conceptual. We're talking about placing your destinations in proximity to each other so you can walk to them, having a good mix of different uses, making sure that you place parks and trails in the right place. It's the conceptual layout of your development.
That's not Bowen Trunk Road, by the way.
And I was gonna say, the
No.
first time I looked at it, I thought, Trump, that doesn't
It's
look
just
like Trump Road
generic
at all. What's wrong with it?
illustration.
Yes, thank you for pointing that. I've gotten a lot of comments around this to say your Bowen Island Trunk Road is in the wrong place relative to the store.
It'd be great to have a multi-use pathway there.
Yeah, it's a generic, standard graphic to kind of just illustrate how you can have these different connections in your network from your paths to your roads to your land uses. And I will edit this graphic best I can so it doesn't look like it's.
So it doesn't confuse
You
all
just say
going on.
road, say road or
Just
something.
road, yeah, Main Street. So that's the planning stage, and then the next stage is subdivision, where you get to put legal lot lines on the ground, and you're really starting to make that development pattern concrete on the ground. And at this stage, we're looking at providing infrastructure that is more balanced and lets people have more choice as to how they want to get around, including public amenities that make it more welcoming to be outside. And again, there's a list of the different types of guidelines you'll see there. And the third part is the building site, and here I think we really have more specific design guidelines. We have a section mainly focused on single family dwellings, because that's the majority of development we have on Bowen. But we also have some guidelines specific to public spaces and commercial spaces. And here we're really focused on the way that you can move within and to and from your development, and making sure that we are prioritizing the pedestrian, the cyclist, and putting the vehicle in a less prominent position in your development, and also making sure that it's accessible for all ages and abilities. That's kind of in a nutshell. I know that was really quick. Hopefully you had a chance to go through it and just like peruse some of the graphics and the different types of guidelines. But the next steps for this document is hopefully to bring it back to council in the next month or so for adoption. And once it's adopted, then we can move forward with the engagement phase. We're going to get a whole bunch of these printed up nicely, professionally, as well as communications materials, and we're engaging the development industry as well as bringing it to the greater public. So that's scheduled for next spring, kind of trying to get ahead of the building season, and we're going to incorporate it into the planning process. So when people come to the municipality with their developments and proposals, either for rezoning or subdivision, this will be one of the documents that they'll be expected to address. It's not a regulation, so we're not saying, here you have to meet every single one of these guidelines. They're guidelines. And really they're meant to be inspirational. You look at these and you're like, this is good for you, it's good for the community. What are some ways you can incorporate some of these ideas into your development? So that's the intent of the guide. And I think specific to this committee, seeking feedback around how these guidelines are incorporating parks and open spaces, and how if there's any feedback, how we could do it better, or if there's additional opportunities.
Awesome, thank you. Christine?
I went through it quite carefully, and of course there's no mention anywhere of equestrian.
Questions? Yes.
And I know it's a pain, I can see it's a pain for people who aren't involved, but if you don't mention the fact that there are people on horses that go from place to place, and that they should use them, if you don't mention that, then blocks are likely to be put in their way. And the graphic on the front there, you have somebody in a wheelchair. Well, I would argue that there are probably many people on horses, but there are people in wheelchairs. So if you just put that in somewhere, just remember that equestrian use
Definitely.
is important.
Yeah, I will go through. I think there's several opportunities to mention equestrians. Talking about the different options for getting around and the
Yeah.
networks and stuff.
I was looking at it, it would be a bit clunky, but
Was there any specific guideline?
Not,
that-
well,
that-
not really. The Parks and Recreation probably would be the main one. But,
It's not so much a mobility thing as a recreation and trail use
Yeah.
and connectivity
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, which is all part of the considerations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll definitely look through and see what we can insert,
Okay, good.
insert equestrians.
Mhm.
Horses, yeah.
Thanks.
Any other comments? Sue Ellen?
I have a couple. I saw this last night, so I had a look at it. I'm looking on, I'm thinking about Bowenizing it. I really like the use of the photos. So I'm looking back on page 5 of the, it starts with how to use the guide, that page. And where it says parks and open space,
Yes.
I'm wondering if you could Bowenize it by saying parks, open space, trails and beaches. Because Bowen is so different from other urban areas and even suburban areas in that we have trails and beaches. And right now, waterways don't really fit for Bowen because we don't have a lot of creeks and rivers sides like a lot of places do. But I thought if it at least includes trails and beaches in there, then it would speak to the Bowen Island situation more.
Okay.
Because I know it's an urban more of an urban oriented thing, and this will help people connect better. And secondly, on the next page, page 8, where it says connect, 2.1.4, connect car free. This sort of talks about connecting dead-end streets and cul-de-sacs, which is the connecting neighborhood to neighborhood, like we've talked about, which I think is in the Parks Plan or somewhere. And but I thought if we could also include that idea of connectivity with trails, and with multi-use pathways, and maybe with nature, because we've got this idea of wildlife corridors and connectivity, so that, for example, deer can move through neighborhoods instead of coming in and being trapped or whatever. I don't know. And then the last one was just on page 9. Bottom right-hand photo with the lady in the power wheelchair. It says 2.2.3 shelter is the little, and what does that refer to?
So in the, actually it doesn't, you look at it as like, where's the shelter? It's actually referring to the tree canopy.
Okay.
And that's in the little description, talking about routes that provide shelter from the elements. So a trail that's exposed versus one that has a nice tree canopy for shade and just wind and sun protection, yeah.
Okay, and then that brings up the last thing I wanted to mention, which is a new report done by the North Shore municipalities about the importance or the significance of urban forest, is what they call it, but tree canopy within a city in terms of slowing down storm runoff and allowing, well, what do they call it? Intersecting water or something, but the rainwater management. And I'll send you that report, and you can see whether you want to, just because it relates to layout and storm water management and water infiltrating the soil and stuff. I don't know that it's that much about active, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be very interested to see it, but I'm not sure.
I don't think
I'll
it
have
fits
to
with
see.
active. Yeah, never mind. The shelter part, that's that. Thank you.
Gigi?
Yeah, just, and it may be a little bit out of place, but, you know, in terms of, you know, encouraging active living and active moving, and I just wonder whether there could be more, and just being in nature, you know, being in a nice space, going on a trail and doing it that way, I think encourages active living, like going for a walk through a, you know, beautiful forest or a meadow to get from point A to point B, and, you know, then you enjoy your things. And I wonder whether somehow there could be just something that's a little bit more explicit in this.
Okay.
That, you know, that there's benefit derived from having, you know, not only you're physically active, there's the health benefits from the physical part, but just the benefits of, you know,
It's the emotional, spiritual, inner attitude kinds of health.
And then nature brings that, right? And so I didn't see that. I could have missed it. It may be just too esoteric, but I wonder whether or not, you know, there's
You're right, there's nothing explicit, but definitely studies have shown, you know, it is important for your health and your well-being to you know, have exposure to nature, be in nature.
And we've got the opportunity here, like, you know, our paths do go through forests and, you know.
So I think we could, as Sue Lynn had mentioned, this concept of active design was born of the urban environment. So we've actually done a lot of work to try and make these guidelines specific to our rural context on Bowen. But the introduction could, I think, would be a great place to kind of insert that that idea of being in nature and how it relates to active living.
Yeah.
I have one more. I think the idea of the health of the under 2.2.2 attractive routes, if you add the word nature in there, because right now it just says features such as landscaping and building facades, but it's what people are attracted to go walking on in Bowen is out into nature, and you talk about views, but the people talk about the hall of the trees, or they go to visit the, they want to see the changing seasons, or they want to see wildlife. So,
One.
Okay. Yeah,
Oh,
and,
Well, I'm sorry, you know, if you want to respond, I'm sorry.
oh, sorry. I was just also saying, like, Parks and Recreation, like 1.1.2, sorry, it's weird for me. Parks and Recreation is mentioned in a couple spaces, actually. And it could be more explicit, but it does talk about connecting to
Nature,
recreation,
yeah.
social gathering, and experience in nature.
Experiencing nature,
Um,
yeah.
Yeah, and that's where, like, it does acknowledge it's important, but I agree. I think in the introduction, if we kind of set the tone.
Yep.
And then, like Sue Ellen mentioned, bring it out in some of the specific guidelines for
Fine.
make it
And
again.
it goes along with that too, Emma, is like connecting to a destination, whether that be a big tree or something, right? Like connecting to a specific natural destination or a built destination.
Okay. So
Which
1.1.3, third places, and that's a concept, third places, as an organic place where people naturally are drawn to and want to gather.
And I guess the language sometimes for me is a bit confusing. So third places, shelter, I don't know what that means. So you're here for us to ask, and maybe it's explained in the document what those terms mean. And I know that those are probably the design sort of terms, but I don't think that they do, it's the readability isn't as great as explaining what that means. Like
That's a very
a
good
third
comment.
place, yeah.
And that was another struggle because we actually had a grad student come in. We got a really good grant, so we're very lucky. And this was supposed to be a next year project for me.
it's great. I was kind of going,
Yeah,
where did this
Yeah,
it's
come
really
from?
It does do a
It's
lot,
very,
yeah.
very good.
But we spent a lot of time trying to come up with the titles because, I mean, like I mentioned before, they were meant to be urban and they're very detailed. So we were trying to find snappy titles that still kind of captured what the guideline was supposed to talk about. But you're right, third places is not a well-known term. So that's definitely something like
Doesn't mean
gathering
anything to me.
places, would that be a little more self-explanatory?
Gathering places,
more
special
like
places, we use that.
destination.
We use special places in the park plan.
And also,
Yeah.
it was pointed out, like, the examples here, like coffee shops, bars, and
Yeah.
stores, libraries, plural.
Yeah.
I've gotten a lot of suggestions so far, I've collected them, like beaches, flat, sunny, green spaces, trailheads, apparently little libraries. I haven't seen any, but do we have some?
I think there's a couple.
Blending
Someone has
libraries.
suggested
Blending
little
libraries.
libraries. Yeah.
Little libraries.
Yeah,
I
and
think
maybe
one of
the
them
future
Blue
community
Water.
center, like those types.
If you put in the words big trees, I think that really captures the idea of a destination out there in nature.
Okay.
And also too, just the idea of encouraging loops, right? And I think you probably mentioned that, but just loops are really important. So if they can somehow incorporate their design into a loop, make a loop, that really encourages people. I know for me, I love walking loops. It's really
It could go in
encouraging.
2.2.2, where you say attractive routes, so that we don't have to go back the same way.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any other comments?
I was just gonna say that this has there's a lot of congruence here with some of the early stuff that the Trails Committee did do. For example, I mean, the pattern of never having a cul-de-sac that just ends. You have a trail that goes out, so it ceases, well, it's public, or semi-private. It has a public function, it's not just private. Similarly, a lot of these other aspects, the idea of loops, trails being, should ideally form loops and dendrites, or dendrites and loops. There's another thing that I'm thinking about in relation to this, particularly as regards a developer and the concept of conservation development. I mean, this addresses the human realm, but there are also elements of this that require the emphasis of the preservation of the natural realm, because it's integral to what we're talking about here. And some of the conservation development things that have happened evidently, there's not an equal distribution of natural elements within the development. And particularly, I'm thinking birds are sort of on the front line of where you start seeing depletion of that when their spaces become fractionated. Then you start seeing, well, what was the recent report on the degradation of, what is it, 3 billion birds have disappeared from North America since 1970.
Over our lifetimes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's staggering. Anyway, I don't know how you would integrate that as an idea.
That's what I was trying to get in with that idea of wildlife corridors, the continuity.
Yeah, maybe that's too nebulous a concept to just throw in as a nebulous concept. But also in relation to, we were talking about the benefits of nature, maybe as a recommended source, there are studies that have recently been done that have been in the press about the benefits of nature. Maybe just referencing one of those articles. You know, studies that have been done is, I don't know how serious developers would be in looking at this, but if they are, then all that stuff is there for them, you know, just a thought.
And speaking to the conservation side of development, that was a big topic last night at the Advisory Planning Commission, which also reviewed these guidelines. I had a chance to talk with Daniel, manager of planning and development, about the concern there around conservation policies, and we went through the draft conservation policy that the APC has put together so far, and we feel that it dovetails quite nicely with these guidelines. In the policy itself, it references the...
I don't know anything about that policy.
Yeah, but just to say
Yeah.
that I feel the conservation side is being addressed by the APC. It's going to be brought forward to council, and it's tied in with the active design guidelines. In the policy, it references transportation objectives. So within that, like you should be aware of, you know, the environmental concerns, but also affordable housing and transportation needs and all that. And so I feel like if a developer were to be following that policy, they would also land on active design as well.
And is there any way to, when we do talk about nature and trails, like to reference the park plan too? Because there are some connections.
It's here on
to
page
this. Oh,
8.
is it? Okay.
So it just,
That's listed
Oh, right
actually,
here.
I think,
Yeah,
several
very good.
places throughout the document.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I'll
as
check that.
recommended
Yeah.
resources, yeah, and also at the very end.
Awesome. Well, you guys have stolen all of my thunder. Like, you guys have already hit on most points. I just wanted to say, it was awesome to get this, because I mean, we deal with connections all the time, and that's one of our big priorities. And just to, a couple of things that I did have in there, I just wanted to repeat, like, yeah, and the third places thing, I think it would be useful to have like a natural space as a gathering place actually listed. And that the connectors are, they're not just for people, they're greenways, and there's a lot of reference to safety and making things accessible, but that also comes with hardening of surfaces and making things wide and maybe eroding away the surrounding green space. But we've kind of hit on that, so those are the two big points that kind of came to me. So, did you put your hand up?
Yeah, I was just kind of, I think, kind of in the same the same thing that you were, but in 2.2.2. And someone already mentioned this too, features such as landscape and building facades should be visually appealing and inviting. Maybe we want to see something there as to like saying we should maintain the forest as it is where possible, instead of, you know, trying to landscape something to make it look good, to just keep what we have where we can.
Embrace the natural landscape that we have.
Yeah.
yeah,
like-
the natural landscape.
Something about maintaining more than like doing something new and
First,
Not even maintaining, but more of like highlighting and showcasing, you know, what we have naturally.
yeah,
right?
yeah. Because sometimes like reading through it, I get the feeling of like, all right, we're gonna tear it all down, and we're gonna build it all up,
Yeah.
and we're gonna, you know, build something.
And
Yeah.
I don't know, along that same line is maybe, and I don't know how you can weave it in with the words, but just to say that the rationale, one of the rationales for that is because the plants here have adapted and many are drought tolerant. So
It's
why
gonna be
would
lower
you-
maintenance.
Yeah, lower maintenance,
Yeah.
yeah, somehow to,
Yeah.
just a little piece of education in there, right, for those native plants.
Awesome. Anyone else? Okay, so we do have a recommendation.
And it's on the screen.
And it's, can you give me a second to flip through here? So are we, Parks and Trails?
This is what I've gathered from what you've said. That would be a comment for Emma. So say if you disagree or agree. Any of those?
You're very good.
O-and-I's. Can't spell that.
No, I think this computer would have figured that one out by now. We use it enough.
So, do we feel comfortable with adopting this? Can I have someone move the recommendation?
You have adopt / not adopt.
Oh, adopt, to.
Have you finished the list though? You're okay with that?
That's pretty good.
Yep. Okay.
I think, yeah.
They just want you to take out those words, not adopt.
Home run, huh?
There you go.
Yeah,
there it is.
Destination, oh, there it is.
I said meadow because it just seemed like to the tree, to the tree.
I was gonna say special trees.
Specific
Special
rather than specific.
Yes.
trees?
For special places.
What did you call them?
Natural, because that's what you use natural places, yeah, natural places.
Sorry, these glasses are for short and that's far.
Do we want to change it to special places?
What did you say, special,
Natural spaces and
Special-
special places.
special natural places, such as, yeah.
Just because I think in the park plan, reference is made to the actual term special places.
And I think you can take out as gathering places.
Right.
No, I
That
think
was
that's the whole.
Mark's
that's the
choice.
Oh,
whole-
okay,
that's
sorry,
the
sorry.
third places.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll figure it out.
Okay.
She'll figure it out.
Including.
Including big trees.
Tree has to be big for us to go there.
It's not just any tree.
Lots of trees are special.
Yeah.
Trees or beautiful meadows.
Or a meadow.
Yeah, I need another adjective now.
Not just the ugly ones,
No,
the beautiful ones.
It could be viewpoints as well, all those sorts of things. Streams,
Yeah.
stream sides,
Yeah.
we don't have a lot of meadows.
Don't we only have one meadow?
Or the meadow.
So just, it's editing, you'll do it, but it's,
Yeah.
such as, it says, special places, so I think it should be such as special
Okay.
places, delete the, yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Maybe meadows, etc.
I've got including.
What says such?
That's true, yes, but not limited to. No,
Because there could be other places that are special,
What does say including?
yeah,
Okay.
like,
You're only allowed 3 special places.
some people like to go by streams, I mean, burbling water or.
Yeah, waterfalls.
Yeah,
Or-
special
or shorelines.
places.
It's all, I think it's all captured there.
I think-
now.
So, yeah.
I think Emma gets the point.
Do you know what a special place is?
I think so now.
Okay, can I have a mover?
I think Christine, you did.
Oh, Christine, I'm sorry. Can I have a seconder? Jeremy, further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma.
Thanks,
That was great.
Emma.
That was awesome. So now
Grafton Lake.
Gardner, talking to you.
No, he's not. I
Okay.
can speak to
Oh, you can do
a little
it.
bit. Not presentation.
So, I think. There you go.
Yeah, I can't, I don't really know what he has in his presentation, but, can you go to him now?
Do we want to let him speak, or?
I was gonna ask, well, what's the procedure when someone shows up after?
Are you an
I don't think
applicant?
I don't think I'm allowed to speak.
No, 'cause
This,
it's-
I only say this because I was at, that's all right.
Yeah.
Yep, no, go ahead.
I was here yesterday for one of the other committees, so I missed the public.
You missed the
Right.
public
So
comments.
that's totally okay. I'm here really just in case you have questions, or happy to answer your questions, obviously, and I'm just here to be engaged.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's really
Awesome.
You are,
Applicant.
Yeah.
one of the, yeah,
Oh,
my wife and I,
okay.
Andrea, I'm Satjeet.
okay,
Awesome.
okay, cool. I was wondering when you walked in, I was like, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah.
So this is a rezoning application, and your property is how many acres? Or
20
just yeah, 20 acres, nectar yoga.
Correct.
And it's quite a special property, beautiful property. It's, Bone Brook runs through the lower portion. It's bounded by some crown land over here. And this is a privately owned parcel of land here. So, I guess it's currently zoned as rural residential.
That's the OCP one.
Okay. OCP designation, rural residential, and land use bylaw zoning is ICA with a piece of rural here. I'm sorry, I don't
It's
know-
just, I see it goes to that purple bit.
Mhm.
That's institutional or something, don't worry about that. That's somebody else's property.
Yeah, okay, good.
So it's rural residential 3, I
And-
think is most of the
And
property,
2.
and rural residential 2.
Two,
Yeah.
just that little
And
bit.
so, yeah, so both of them, I think, have mostly the same land uses allowed. And I can't remember quite what the difference was, but.
I think it's
So
a
here's
density.
where- just-
Yeah. What's that?
Yeah,
I think
so
it's a
dwelling-
density.
So here's all the current dwelling, agriculture, horticulture, domestic agricultural, staple, and kennel.
I reviewed this a little bit with Daniel as well, so
Yeah,
I'll try
good.
to
So
help
just,
you a little
so
bit.
sorry, Daniel, his apologies, he couldn't be here tonight, so I just talked to him very briefly going out to CRC today, but, yeah.
And I think the idea too was that Daniel anticipated that you guys want to do a site
Walkabout,
visit.
Yeah,
And then there would be another meeting. I just want the applicant to be assured that this is
Yeah.
one phase, and then there'll be a more thorough, yeah.
Okay.
yeah, because that was the idea that, knowing that we'd like to go for walkabouts, and especially because there are some potential easements and potential trails. And so the walkabout was definitely something that we probably would want to do.
I'm just trying to position where this.
It's Sigurd Sabathiel's old property.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
old property.
Okay.
So we have the trail, Mike's Lore, and I guess it's quite a bit of a park there as well, kind of a good swamp that goes across, that borders the property.
It's big though, eh?
Yeah.
20
Mhm.
acres?
Must be one of these.
Is
Then this would be
it
the purple
on
one.
Grafton Road?
So
No, it's
that's.
on Gardner.
Yeah,
But,
Or off Gardner?
I think it's that big one.
Oh.
And Eddie's pit is just to the west.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, I
It's
guess-
right at the corner,
It's right at the corner.
Is this big thing?
it's like opposite Willie's Way, like the
That's
Expo.
Buchanan,
Yeah,
it's right
yeah.
at the,
This is.
This is Gardner Lanes.
Yeah.
So I think it's this, right?
That-
It's this
That
one.
giant.
There's those-
And there's
there's those little ponds.
Yeah,
See
got it.
those little
Section.
ponds?
Yeah.
Right.
So that portion, there are two portions.
This is why I brought this map. I was-
So this is what's being proposed, is the retreat center use. RR3 zoning on the western portion of the lot unchanged.
So, what is?
So-
I think they're trail connections.
Yeah, if we go.
It's a little bit messy here.
So we have a trail that goes through the park, and we have also a,
We have a trail that
along
goes,
there, yeah.
This is Mike's Lorg.
And so Eddie's Pit is to the left there, but in between the two properties, there's also a road, right of way. So there's potential already there to build a trail which would connect to the Crown land up there,
So
where is the,
right there, yeah,
potentially up to this Crown Land block here.
yeah.
Right? There's also, so this is a private lot, but in the future, perhaps that will be subdivided. So there is potentially maybe another easement, maybe this is just, there's certain options here. So we could either look at an easement or potentially look at an easement this side along Eddie's Pit. I mean, maybe not the nicest views at some points, but it would intersect with the Crown land. This, looking forward, again, supported by the Parks Plan, you know, looking forward that this big chunk at some point may be subdivided, and then we've got the Crown land here.
Bonnie, is that a road right of way if you continue the laneway towards the Crown land straight up?
Yes,
It
It is a road right of way.
it shows on here anyway, this one, right?
It is,
What is
but,
that?
oh, sorry.
The brown dotted, what are those lines indicating?
Potential trails, I think.
Yeah, I think maybe Daniel just put some of those on there. That one of those is an existing trail, but it crosses private property, so it's not, I don't think it's on
That's
most
part
of our
the
maps, I think it's
Cross
on,
Island Trail.
yeah, I think it's on,
That parallels the creek and that part, I think.
yeah, I'm not sure.
The one that goes crossways through that big block, that one.
So, when I commented on this for Daniel, I looked really carefully at all of the slopes around there, and it would be quite difficult to build a trail along where the right of way already is. I think the benefit to having it on the west side is that we already have the right of way, so potentially if we got an easement, we have more land to work with. But it would really probably have to do one of these things, right? And so hopefully, you know, the landowner would be open to having an easement instead of just oh, here's another swath here, like something that meanders.
Actually could make a trail.
Yeah, because I think that's the only way that we could do it. And I think the benefit there is that we're already connecting into the Crown land. But on the other side, I think looks like it's more possible to build a trail. Like, I think it's quite steep on that side, and I don't know if it's possible at all.
I'm looking forward to the walk.
Yeah, the walk.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So showing the funds on the park there. Daniel's recommendation.
So I don't think we would need a recommendation today, other
No,
than that.
because
you
we can't
wanna
really,
make it
Yeah.
about-
until we do a walk.
we should do a walk. I will,
Do you want to just try to schedule right now?
well, I think Daniel would probably,
I asked him, he said he's free,
One
except
other-
for his girls have soccer, I think at 11 on Saturdays.
I just wanted to mention too that one other option that Daniel and I had talked about was that we asked that the park be extended into into the property on the south side of the property, because there's already a park there, and then it might make more sense to
following the creek of
to protect the creek with parkland, rather than a trail that might be impossible to build, or might not ever connect to a trail that is not going to be public.
Or there might,
So,
And it leads to Eddie's Pit. No offense against Eddie's Pit.
yeah, so there's some options, and I think that the walkabout will be really
Yeah.
good, it will clarify that for us, but there is that possibility of growing Bonny Brook, having a park there. We'd probably have to have an easement for the property owner to access the property if that was the property owner. And and there's some options there. It's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's something to look forward to.
I'm just thinking that the key thing in terms of trail, potential future trails is the Cross Island Trail, which is only parks on ground land. But the idea of that, I can see the idea of a loop. So you could make it shorter, you wouldn't have to go all the way to Grafton. You could do a short loop and come back somehow. It just is expressing as an alternative to the park expansion idea that in terms of future trail possibilities, it's that Cross Island Trail that's the major link, yeah, that you have to start thinking
The future
around.
link, yeah.
Yeah, potential future link. And we've already, I mean, that was sort of part of the mind jazz thing that we did back in, Jurassic, when we were originally starting that whole trails.
I'm sorry, Jeremy, explain again what you're talking about. What is this?
The Cross Island Trail runs across sort of the top portion of that.
The diagonal across,
Yes.
that's the Cross Island
And
Trail.
the idea of making a loop so that you could come, say, from Laura Road, this is talking about the future, and walk up, and then you could make it short. You wouldn't have to go all the way to Grafton Lake. You could,
Oh, I see.
yeah, the other option, of course, would be coming the other way from Grafton Lake. You could make a shorter loop. It's just, it embodies that idea of loops and alternatives and dendrites of trails, which is pretty critical.
And just
And,
the island-wide network.
yeah,
And also protecting the parks and stuff. We'll have to see how steep and feasible the trails are, because the other thing you don't necessarily want is all your trails to be down in the bottom of the creek valley. Not good for the creek, not good for the experience to be in the deep shade down there all the time.
and also whether it lends itself to equestrian uses.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, this is something kind of sad, because I used to ride all around there, and it's now all private property, because horses at Darlene's place, and go through Harding's place,
Oh.
Eddie's place,
And up
Satjeet's
into,
place.
so up into
Yeah, all
Cranbrook
through
Street?
there,
Yeah.
around the back. and-
Around the back
Yeah.
as well.
So that's all horse
It was, yeah, but I mean, that was
So-
one.
Conducive to,
Private property.
like, quite doable
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Yeah.
a person, yeah.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Good. So-
Okay, so you said Daniel has already given you a schedule of his availability?
He says his only commitment, I said, you guys often do walkouts on weekends?
Yeah.
He just got his girls' soccer on Saturday mornings, I think.
So it's
So maybe Saturday afternoon would be better,
Or
or
okay.
Sunday, anytime.
Okay. So do we want
If
to,
you're doing a weekend, that seems to be where you land sometimes.
can we just quickly go over our schedules and see if we can get that done?
And I know his committee schedule, so if you want to do an evening.
So we were doing Friday afternoons, or does that work for people, Friday afternoon?
Yeah, we had been trying, I was sort of
Yeah.
it depended on when it was gonna get dark, right?
Yeah.
And
Was it 3 o'clock? Was 3
it
o'clock?
might be better at this time of year,
This time of
because
year
it
it's
gets,
gonna get dark.
gets dark 6.
But we need to make sure that Daniel.
I've got his calendar here.
Yeah.
And the standard time is going on, it's going to be even darker,
Yeah.
Yes.
I think you'd be
When
right.
does that change?
3rd of November.
3rd of November.
Oh.
Actually, I have 2 dates here, so this is going to change. One the week before.
Terrible calendar. Oh, mind jazz.
Yeah, new calendar here, so new applications.
So when,
So I've got a Daniel gone, question mark,
Friday's better for me.
on the 25th, Friday, so,
so he's not here for?
oh, Friday the 1st.
November 1st, the day after Halloween.
Yeah, I can go off to the housing committee meeting until 1. Billy Daniel's secretary, I can't decide if I'm a secretary or really.
So does anyone have a problem with November 1st?
Yeah,
So I can't.
no, not that Friday.
Well, we got a few
No,
people.
No, go ahead.
Proponents, there's an economic development committee that we're,
Yeah.
the meeting that we would probably like to attend as well, at 1 o'clock. Just want to put that.
Oh, he doesn't have that in his calendar.
Daniel doesn't have it, so yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Daniel would.
Wow, okay.
Does he go?
Well, he will for that file,
Ah.
so he wouldn't have been on that. So what about the 8th, Friday the 8th?
I'll be away, but I'm happy for you guys to do it.
3 o'clock?
I'm seeing nodding. Okay.
So that's the time shift has already happened by that point. It happened, the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking it might be wise to have it a bit
For
earlier,
1 o'clock?
especially if it takes a bit of,
2?
Owie.
Do I hear a 2?
because it starts
You think
getting dark.
How long will it take us? Like,
Or-
how much?
I think it would take a while.
It's gonna take,
Need
because I
a
think
couple
we're
of
gonna wanna
hours?
see both
How much
sides,
time
right?
do you think
Figure
you
if
need
you're
at
in the
least?
forest, it's gonna be 4:30.
Give yourself an hour at least.
Yeah,
And
okay.
then
Or
an
2
hour.
hours?
I'm not
It
yet
takes
from
like the 2 of those, it's
I think 2.
hour.
Can you?
Give it
yeah,
2
can you make
hours.
2?
Best
2 o'clock.
book more than less.
2:30?
Anybody
Oh,
here?
2:30.
He said an hour.
Oh, yeah, 2:30 should work.
Yeah. We said Friday, November 8th?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna send the invite out
Okay.
and ask you all not to, because sometimes we all do it at the same time, we clash with each other.
Okay.
Breaks loose.
They were never
Yeah,
seen.
I'll be on Hornby. I'll just leave it to you guys, yeah.
Take some.
Yeah. Perfect. I can't do everything.
You could
Just
try.
the fun stuff. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
7:20.
Where's the meeting place?
Do you know what a good place to meet?
Probably right at the top of the driveway. See that?
Which is that,
Better
that's
wait for.
Oh, yeah, it's right on the gravel there.
where the catamaran used to be.
Yeah, well, the cat's right.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. We said 2:30. There's a. Okay, cool.
Great.
So we'll see November 8th.
Yeah, thank you. Good to
Thank
see
you.
you.
Great,
to see
thank you.
you.
Yeah,
Okay.
good to, thanks for coming. Nice. Okay.
I think we're gonna be known as Yoga Island before too long.
Don't they already have a place on Millers?
That's one of my questions.
He's a geophysicist or?
They were on Seven Hills and.
They were on Miller and they moved.
Millers, yeah, they're where I used to rent for years.
Oh, there you go. So then they.
Okay, so they're up, moving up in the world.
Okay. Hang on, you're getting the hand.
No, it's gone now.
Oh,
Have it.
it was both hands, that's okay. Okay, 6.1, oh, and there it is. Staff update, Carla, Skuce, and Bonny will retire. Awesome.
I don't really have much of an update.
Works for me.
Tell us about the.
But I'll tell you about the planting. So we went out on Saturday and we did a planting with about 15 people, all from.
I know, it was amazing.
Greenways. No, it stopped raining, like pretty much the whole time, it just sprinkled a little bit later on, maybe in the second hour. But we got all the trees and all the shrubs planted, which was huge, because it was hard digging out there, and I would have been out there for the rest of the year, probably trying to do it myself, so it was really great, we had a lot of hard workers come. Really great that Bonny was back, and that Mark helped me with the tent and everything, I think I might have bitten off more than I could chew there. If I didn't have their help, because it was busy, it was really busy, and it was great, like Bonny was setting up all the plants where they needed to be planted, and everybody just worked straight through, and so we got a lot done, and it looks amazing right now. So feel free to go by and have a look. I'm still working on it. Mark has been helping me, which is very, very generous of him to offer his time, and I really appreciate it. And so we're just planting out the slope right now. We didn't have the volunteers plant the slope. I would have if they wanted to stay for much longer, but you know, you can only ask people to do so much. But it's fairly steep, and I didn't want to have the cave right back into the ditch. And so we're trying to carefully plant the soap right now, and then we're gonna do some mulching as well. So yeah, it's ongoing for a little bit. It'll take a couple more weeks to get it all.
Looks amazing, Carla. The plants were really good. Which is nice too, because there is some evidence there, right? Like we have, the Snowberry, the deer There are those nice, the mahonia berries, the snowberries, the black rock orange, there is some chokecherry. So there are some edibles there really. So yeah, I mean, they're not all maybe native to Long Island, but there is that component where there is the nice native, fibrous, nutritious berries that can be mixed with other things to eat. So really highlighted that with some of the neighbors there. Said, you know, you could come and enjoy some of the fruits that are there. Yeah. Oh, and Pacific crab.
Pacific crab apple.
Yeah. Pacific crab apple.
Arbutus.
So there's
Service berry. We got a lot of that. So it's more of an interior variety, but we kind of did that because I thought it's such a disturbed site and it's going to be so stinking hot out there and so sunny and there's just no shade. So, you know, I mean, you try and go, I mean, the first thing I do when I'm trying to choose plants for a site is look around and see what's there already, right? Because you know that that can grow there, but it's, you look around there and there's grass, you know, grass and garbage and invasives and
And yarrow, like the yarrow just loves it up there
Yeah,
around
around
the labyrinth.
Well,
There's a
there's
lot of the
the
tansy though.
tansies there.
It's
the
tansy,
yeah.
The ragwort, right? So it's really bad for people who react so badly.
Yeah, yeah,
And that
no.
came from hydroseeding, right?
Yeah.
Oh, is that how that got there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Gorse and Broom,
And,
of
and
course.
Gorse and Broom came because historically it was the tailing site for the ditching. And you know, back then, because there wasn't really anything up there, and that's just where it was convenient and not faulting the one's crew. I mean, it was just made sense at the time. But unfortunately, those I call them dealings, but I mean, that's where all the nasties love to
Piles
be. Yes, dirt.
And I really like one of the comments that Carla made when we were going, because when we were putting plants out, well, Bonny and Carla were, I said, are there any trails through this? And they said, well, you know what, this is more of like a naturalized area. Like, it's not really meant like as an ornamental, like as rehabilitation, it's more natural.
I think there will be opportunity when it grows up to have a nice little area, maybe a little contemplative bench or something.
Yeah,
I'm
there.
sure.
So, yeah, and I think the birds are gonna love it.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
We're giving it back to the birds.
Yeah.
They love service berries. They have a bush
Restoration.
name.
Oh, do they love it?
Yeah, I have a pair of nesting western tanagers, they come up,
I was just about to say, does that mean
they
they're
come
going to
up to
Western
that
Canada?
bush and it's a priority.
How about the wax wings?
Oh, yeah, the wax wings,
they
yeah,
love
I
it.
had two pairs that I think bred twice, because the first one, their nest got blown out by really fierce winds we had, and I found the nest and the eggs broken. But, yeah,
Wow.
they kept at it.
What do the eggs look like for?
They were actually, I think it was a brown thing. The egg had smashed and it was sort of yolk and little pieces and it was brown, but
Brownish.
they always seem to build nests that are too small for their young when they. I've seen them falling out. Some of them ended up inside my house when I had the door open and I had to round them up and get them back to their mother.
They're trying to get into your fridge.
That is
It's a housing crisis.
Oh,
And
don't
another
open
one,
up that book, that's pretty.
Okay.
And it didn't rain, well, it rained a little bit, but it was just such a nice window, like it was in pouring rain
Yeah.
for the, I had to leave early, so these two, they carried on.
And you know, there's some kids there getting right into it, and yeah, it's just a lot of people.
Planting the
really
trees,
good.
yeah, so nice.
Yeah.
Were they mostly people from Catesville?
Yeah, I think everybody
Yeah.
was.
Great.
There was one family that came right from across the street, and so they had their two kids, and the parents were like, well, this is gonna be so wonderful, because you can come back in 20 years and you can say, I planted that tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is so great.
It's
This is
really
what, we,
special.
I mean, we talked about this back when the Catesville Neighborhood Park was established as a park, and it was just a little sort of muddy, cleared area at the time. And we thought, no, one day, when, you know, yeah. This is the kind of thing we were envisioning, how great to see that kind of thing.
Carla, maybe I just mentioned that we just received the bog study as well, so for the headwaters. So anyway,
Yeah.
so we received that, so.
Awesome.
Oh, right.
I was thinking about that, and I know I emailed Swell, and I'm not sure if everyone got CC'd on that email, but I was thinking about the Mike Cummings and everything. and
I'm
they
gonna talk
had-
about that next, and what
Yeah.
we could do with that.
Okay, well, can I throw out my
Yeah.
ladder? It's, so because I think this restoration that Claudia has recommended in her study is fairly simple, like I don't think it's gonna cost a whole lot of money. And that we've already invested a little bit of money in Quarry Park with the toilet and that kind of thing, and Meg Cummings is a matching grant, sometimes it's hard to find the right project that we are spending money on and that Meg Cummings also wants to spend money on. So if we're doing all the parking and we're doing the toilet, and that I thought we could maybe extend that project into redoing the big signs, like new maps. Maybe we could fix up some of the drainage there if that's still an issue. I think most of it got fixed, but I don't really know what else there is to do there. But I will say we did we also got Meg Cummings for the grant for clearing out the view, which didn't work out super well because the neighbors there, I think, they didn't want us to take any of their trees down, and they made sure and got a survey, and most of the trees that came down, I think, they didn't clear out the view very well. The trees that were
It's
taken
kind
down,
of sad.
which
Actually,
is a little bit too bad.
I just looked at a picture I had of that viewpoint from like 15 years ago. And it
Yeah.
was stunning.
So there's maybe more room for improvement there as well, but I thought of maybe making that, a big project that we could get that money.
Did we ever get any Maggie Cumming fund this year? I don't think so, did
No.
we? No, and I'll talk to that too, but this is good, you're keeping ideas in mind for the Maggie Cumming project.
And maybe if we can ask earlier, then we can, actually start on it right away and plan for it, and so, we can do it in.
Yeah, you have the other half of the budget, because it's a 50-50 budget thing.
Yeah, so we already have it, and, right. we can start.
Well, I'll start, if I can go into my 6.2.
Are you finished?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
yeah.
I just had one
Yeah.
question.
Sure.
Where are we at with the pit toilet?
Well, Ian, that's kind of Ian's project,
Oh,
not
okay.
so much mine, but basically what he has said is he's pretty sure that we're gonna need all of the space there in order for cars to actually be able to back out and come back in. So as a next step, he wants to get a survey done. So he's organizing that, and I know he was off work for like a month.
Right.
He had surgery, and so
Had surgery,
everything's
there
a
you
little
go.
bit behind, so that's his next step.
Cool.
Awesome.
I have a question for Carla too. Do you have an update on the trail from Clarny Lake to the skid trail? Is that happening? Okay.
No, it's, I just haven't heard back from Carl's.
Okay.
And, I ran into, Kevin, Bernard's a little while ago at in town, and he just said, oh, I think your approval's coming through really soon. They were just asking me for comment, and I was like, yeah, sure. So,
It
that
takes a
was-
long time.
Yeah.
that was in the summer,
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Because it's been about 18 months,
Yeah, it's,
hasn't it? 18 months, because it
Well,
was.
they lost our application, so when I got back, I was like, what's going on with this? And they're like, which application?
What are you talking
So,
about?
he said he was gonna fast track it through because it had been held up so long. But so far, the fast tracking has taken like 8 months. So, I'm
You
just
wanna be
kind
able
of
to
trying to
slow track.
forget about it. He doesn't even respond to my emails anymore, so. Yeah, I don't bother.
Yeah, okay.
Did I see your handbook?
Oh, I was just saying because Claudia's report, the work that she's suggesting for the restoration isn't very extensive, that we budgeted, but we would have a little bit of money left over, perhaps, in our budget for some extra.
We did budget for that?
I'm pretty sure I budgeted, I budgeted for, yeah, we did budget. There was when I left.
Yeah,
When
I don't
left,
think it
there was a
ended up
budget
in
for
there.
it. Yeah, and it was
I'll
quite a
speak-
hefty budget because I sort of
Right.
anticipated some more
Well,
extensive work. But anyway.
If I
we'll
can
check.
go on to my part, I think,
I'm sorry. You're
Yeah,
done.
go
Okay.
for it.
okay,
So,
all right, sorry. It's all related. I think one of the things as a small community is when one person takes leave or gets injured or whatever, one staff person. Big changes happen. And when Bonnie went on leave, I think a lot of the budget stuff didn't get translated into being in the budget, is my take on it, and that's what I understood. So, anyway, I think Bonnie gets to start off fresh on the parks plan now that she's back, but I'm not sure. I could have gone and asked staff exactly how much is in which budget and all this kind of stuff, but I didn't. I just was working through our CAO and trying to find a way for the Maggie Cumming Bowen Island Foundation money to come to us. Did we have matching funds? No, there didn't appear to be any to the CAO. So maybe it was in there and we just didn't know. But with then, so besides not having Bonnie, we also lost the continuity of getting Maggie Cumming Foundation funding because we were getting close to their meeting, their annual general meeting, where we're going to announce the, because we've been on the walkabout, so we're going to announce the potential Headwaters Trail thing, because we hadn't received the report, sorry, the bog restoration, but we hadn't received the report and the other project, which I've forgotten what it is. But anyway, then we were getting close to that. The chair of the foundation and our CAO and I had met, and we and then it was all kind of nebulous, and he was going, well, we actually want matching funds for like several years, and I'm going, we don't do that. We're a municipality. We don't have budgets that go several years. And he said, well, isn't there something like that? And then, oh, the multi-use trail budget. And but then that's not quite right, because it's all about transportation. It's not about nature and trails like Maggie Cumming wanted. Anyway, and then he had a health issue, and I just sort of went, okay, I'm running around in circles. I'm just going to stop. And by then it was summer, and council was almost done. And, you know, we didn't have the bog report at that time, and I just went, okay, I'm going to go do something else. And so it seems to me, and this is just an idea, but Bonnie, maybe you and I want to meet with whoever is in charge of the Maggie Cumming file with the Bowen Island Foundation, because we've never been able to get it to work yet, partly because of the necessity for matching funds. And how do we know ahead of time that we've got this matching fund program? Anyway, I think we need to look at the terms of reference with them and talk about it with them, so that we can get it, so that it lines up and we can make it work, because a municipal budget doesn't set aside matching funds. Anyway, something like that. Anyway, so you can put that on my action list if you want. I'm going to talk to Bonnie about how to make how to work with the Bowen Island Foundation to make the Maggie Cumming Legacy Fund work. And I wanted to also...
Can I just interject quickly?
Yeah.
Like, it would be nice to know, to have a date, maybe you just kind of covered that, I missed it, but it would be nice to know what the date for recommendations from us, like, is it January or February or?
That's partly what I want to talk about,
Okay.
because up till now, we kind of set the budget. Doesn't happen till March, but the foundation needs to know by the end of March, you know?
Because it would be nice to have in our work plan,
The
like,
dates
hey,
never, yeah, exactly.
every year at this time, we need to have a
Yeah,
recommendation. We can-
and they would prefer to know before that.
Yeah.
So here we are, we can say we're ahead of the game this year. How can we really make this work?
For 2020.
2020, yeah, that's right. And so you and I can get together at some point.
I have another question. The Maggie Cummings Fund, this is probably maybe too specific and you might not know, but if you could ask at some point, I probably might have another grant that will come in for $3,000 that can be spent on plants around about. Can that be matching funds? Can the matching funds come from someone else as well?
Yeah, good.
Is that?
Good question.
So then we'd only need like,
Good question.
Yeah.
I think Carla should be.
Yes,
Because Carla has the vision.
totally.
Carla,
And we've got the continuity now
Yeah,
between
yeah,
this year and you know, and done the report
So
and
that'd
stuff.
be good for us to meet with them and
Yeah.
just explain sort of our side of how it's going to get cumbersome.
Can I just task you with setting that meeting up?
Yeah, I can set up that meeting.
Okay, great. Probably if the three of us can meet first, and then we can go to the foundation.
I need to apply for that grant by January 1st. So I'd really like to figure out if it's gonna work.
Let's talk about that at our meeting too.
Hopefully we can meet with Maggie Cummings quick sooner than later, or just even ask them a question, can the match the funds come from another grant?
Yeah.
Just sending an email to them.
Yeah. Okay, and then, I wanted to mention that, as part of, this is a long catch-up, because I haven't seen you guys since like June or July or something. As part of Islands Trust and, Bowen Island Municipality, I go to this, set of meetings in September every year that are called the Union of BC Municipalities. So this year it was in Vancouver, and, libraries was a big topic. I went to all kinds of things. But also, I went to a forestry session, so this relates to logging. And this was fascinating because it was, oops, I lost my page. Now I'm on the library's page. There we go. I went to a forestry session, and so many mills have closed in British Columbia because prices for wood are down, and many big companies are just sort of pulling out of small communities, closing mills. And I think the provincial government is realizing that they don't have, the annual allowable cut is not working because the trees aren't there to cut. So they, there's going to be changes in the way British Columbia's forests are managed, is what I heard. Not that anything has been announced yet, but the Minister, Doug Donaldson, was there. Changes have been happening. This idea of selling tenures has to go. They want to start maximizing value versus maximizing volume, which has been happening. So anyway, in the past. Anyway, the point is that there may be less threat to Bowen's forests being logged, because the other thing I found out, and then the other thing we do is go have meetings with ministry staff and ministers. So this time, we, as an Islands Trust Vice Chair, I went to a meeting with the Deputy Minister of Forest, Lands, Natural Resources and Rural Development, whatever it's called. And so this was really interesting because it was speaking specifically to the South Coast, to our region. And they took on board this idea that the Islands Trust actually is an act, a provincial act, of preserve and protect. So they were listening to that. They were talking about a different process for old growth. They were talking about, specific to Bowen, that this idea of the scenery, of the views, I forget what they call it, they have a technical name for it, but it's a kind of assessment that's done of what is going to be the impact on tourism and the viewscape. That hadn't been done for Bowen, so the fact that BC Timber Sales came here without that in place had been an oversight, and it just sounded so much more hopeful in terms of also that BC Timber Sales now was under Alan John's route, the South Coast, which includes Bowen and Gambier. So it wasn't as independent as it used to be. It was sort of being brought into more regulated. BC Timber Sales being that kind of arm's length company that Bonny and I met with years ago. and they came, and Bonny invited me, let's put it that way. Anyway, so that it may be that the threat of industrial logging on Bowen's Crown lands is diminished. So I just wanted to give people that idea, and I'll continue to be following up on it with things like that. So that's the kind of thing that happens at Union and BC municipalities. I can tell you more about that. Sorry, I just want to tell you, on Friday, we have a House Sound Forum meeting. So there's been a bunch of maps put out about House Sound, looking at it as a whole. And there will be an application going to the UN program of biodiversity. What's it called?
Biosphere.
Thank you, biosphere reserves, or biospheres, really. It's a region that can be managed sustainably, and it's just to encourage everybody to have all the maps and talk to each other, networking. I'm being really boring here, but I've got some maps you can just have a look at, show them around. And I wanted to mention, oh, I'm on the board now of the Islands Trust Conservancy. So that used to be the Islands Trust Fund, now it's called the Islands Trust Conservancy, and I'm also the vice chair, which doesn't mean anything, just in case Kate Louise can't come. So she's over in Gambier. So we have a House Sound voice in the Islands Trust Conservancy. And so that relates to the Regional Conservation Plan. And there's some very Bowen-specific pages back in here, if anybody wants to know the conservation goals of the Islands Trust Conservancy. That's my report. Okay. Thank you for everybody's patience. I haven't been around for a while. I felt like I needed to do some talking.
That's good news, especially with the forest.
Well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But it was
Let's not stop being
Yeah,
vigilant.
yeah.
Okay. Look at that. Oh, Phil's not here, so you know that. So look at that. DJ's gonna give us a presentation. 6 months in. So I just want to give a quick little bit of context, because we've probably all forgotten about 6 months ago. A member of the public came and was talking about moving logs from beaches. There's a bunch of issues wrapped around it. A lot of it has to do with money and how much money does they have to clear, and whether or not it's environmentally sound to remove logs from beaches, and what are the benefits of logs on beaches. Thank you very much for your patience.
Well, no problem, and I got to do a few extra slides at the end, so of some things I never do. But in my classic here, I thought, I'll just, I'll do the thing, and I have my other email there, but I see I neglected to take out the Stewardship Center, because part of my work with the Stewardship Center is around shoreline, so forgive me for sort of doing both at the same time, but everybody has lots of hats, right? So this is just a quick overview. Let's see, so I guess it's the one there. So basically, one of the things that I think generally, and I'll just, you guys probably know all this information, but sometimes it's good to just sort of go over, how can we frame this? How can we frame the conversation? And we like to talk about insects to orcas. The idea that there is a direct link between what happens on the terrestrial side of shorelines to the aquatic. And so what a lot of people don't know is those logs, which, and that terrestrial vegetation along the shore, provide amazing nutrients to the phytoplankton and zooplankton in the water that those young fish eat. So having that relationship is really, really important between that. So, and obviously this just goes up the food chain, right? So we've got the vegetation that falls into the shore, the foreshore area. We've got our phytoplankton, zooplankton. We have areas that the sand lance and surf smelt, then go up the food chain to the key food for Chinook salmon, for example. Then the salmon obviously are a key food source for the orcas, and that we can really look at the direct relationship between those insects that fall from the terrestrial end of things and that are part of living in along those logs on beaches are really vital to our most iconic species. And it was actually, interestingly, I think it was an islands trustee years ago said to my colleague, well, we really don't care about the phytoplankton. What we care about are the orcas, you know? And okay, how can you make the link? Okay, well, you've got to be explicit, right? If you don't have this, then you don't have those those iconic species. The other thing in terms of stability along the shore, and forgive me for just getting a little bit into more of the physical processes, but the logs on beaches really relate to the sort of the healthiness of the physical processes of the shore. So what a lot of times people don't realize is that shorelines naturally erode, and we need to have sources of sediment, either an eroding bluff, or a lot of sources of sediment are from our stream systems that bring gravel, rocks, etc., and they nourish our beaches. So we've got this, in this case here, this is out Powell River, not Powell River, near Comox. So we've got our sediment source, we've got our transportation that goes along here, and then we have a big sand spit over here, and then a sediment sink. So that's a completely natural process, and we want to encourage that. And so in many cases, if we're doing things that impede that natural process, then then the beach can get scoured, and then you lose those natural features such as sand and gravel, but also you can also lose your structural elements like those partially embedded logs, etc. So you want to be aware of that in terms of however you manage the shore. That there is the biological end of things, but there's also the physical end of things, and you need to think about that when you're doing your shore management and what you do on there. The other thing is a lot of times we don't manage things very well, and we take away the vegetation, and then woohoo, we're a little surprised when we start losing the slope in front of that house there. And then that can lead to further deterioration as time goes on. As a matter of fact, in this area here, this is an older photograph, but apparently there's a lot of people who want to armor the foot of this slope here, which then of course is ultimately going to starve the wonderful beach that they enjoy at the other end, right? Because you're not going to get that sediment source anymore. So you got to think about things like that. So you've got the physical places. And I think I already mentioned this, but this is in terms of the riparian zone. And this was a study from Washington State taking a look at on this side, the percentage in young salmon that comes from terrestrial sources versus marine phytoplankton and benthic. And this is the green. It's about 50% of food for young salmon comes from terrestrial sources, which is, I was astounded. I was just like, well, that's significant. So you need to think about that. And I think we've already talked about sand lance and the spawn on beaches, and they really require really stable foreshore areas. Looking at overall where those logs come from. Now, a lot of them in natural areas, they're going to fall onto the beach. And of course, we, through logging, though it's a lot less now than we used to get, was the ones that break away. So really, what we're talking about more in terms of large woody debris on beaches are the ones that come naturally and that they fall in. And so we've got them providing, from the riparian zone here, providing shade and overhang and that structural end of the large woody debris, which, and I think I did a little blow up of this one. Yeah, here. So you can see how the surf smelt can spawn in that beach rack with the large woody debris. All the leaf litter and rover beaters, sand, fleas, they're all really dependent on that woody material. We've got habitat cover, complexity, organic matter for aquatic insects, and basically having that woody material there, it can help accrete and sort sediments, creating spawning habitat for forage fish. If you're going back to the insects to orcas, we have our forage fish feed the salmon, feed the orcas. So that's super, super important to have that large woody debris there. It also can act to stabilize shores, beach sediments and vegetation, and provide a natural shore protection. With some large woody debris in there, it can capture sediment, and then you can get your native grasses and whatnot growing in there. Sedges helps protect dune communities, and then you're basically having a much more naturalized shore. And in contrast, you can think of areas where you have the seawall and the grass that goes straight out, and then the immediate drop off, and you're really losing that natural the whole community of vegetation there. So what are some best management practices for large woody debris on beaches? Basically, you need to know that removing or relocating woody material may require permits or other approvals, and this is something that's very important, are subject to fisheries timing windows. Basically, if you do need to have a permit, then you have to be subject to the fisheries timing windows depending on where you are. And really one of the best things to do is not to have any large machinery on the beach. You want to work from upland if you can. And I know with the large machinery on the beach, sometimes you're required to put something down so the machine doesn't actually, because you don't want to dig up all the sand and gravel, right? So you can have the machine go on, some sort of wood that goes along if you can't work from upland. Certainly, you need to have some sort of professional guidance in terms of introducing or removing woody material, particularly if it's buried or semi-buried. So you want to have that perspective from looking at the habitat, and also avoid creating hazard. We used with Green Shores large woody debris to a certain extent to that it's buried or semi-buried, just to create that slope stability. But it definitely needs to be placed, you just can't sort of throw it down there. You need to have it placed properly and consider those shoreline processes, because if you just put it in there then, and you're not looking at, which way does the water, the wind and the fetch and the impact, then there's a good chance you're just going to have it be washed away. Nowadays, it used to be they would stabilize large woody debris by mechanical means such as anchors, and I know there's a project up on the Sunshine Coast where they have this, this large woody debris, and it's all wrapped in cable and stuff in there. They don't recommend doing that now.
Because you would have to dig down. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, well, they don't. Yeah, and it doesn't work very well, because I think they would tend to do that because they hadn't done the studies to look at
the shoreline
the
processes.
shoreline processes. They just sort of, we'll just sort of you know.
We're just gonna anchor it in there.
Exactly.
Yeah, but then the currents could come and take all the sand.
Yeah,
away.
and then it starts moving around, and then, yeah, it can be really good. So they generally, only recommended by a qualified professional, right? So, but generally what I've heard is that if you need to anchor it, then it's not
It's in the wrong
properly
place.
designed, yes. So that's basically that. I just wanted to mention, the Screen Shores for Homes guides, because this is something that does have something specific to large woody debris, and I think I put it in there. And basically, the idea is that to encourage shoreline property owners to keep what large woody debris they have on their beach, and then if they're doing a project, so keep what's there, and that can even mean, okay, sometimes if they're doing a shoreline project, they can move it, do what they want to, and then put it back, right? To not just get rid of it. And we try to encourage, this 80% of it, just leave it, and then you get 3 points for that. And I won't get into the whole what are points for and whatnot, but the other option is to encourage to replace, look at a site nearby and say how much woody debris naturally should be on this site. Let's say it's been cleaned up. Then encourage replacing that so that you have a more naturalized woody debris. So I just wanted to mention that. So there's options. So now we get into the fun bit. So what did I learn when I was on the coast path relating to things? So this is
When you were where?
I was on the coast path in Cornwall.
Oh, right.
In September. So there I am, like super hot. It was like super hot and sweaty, but this was and Mark told me I could do this.
I was just about to say, I endorse this.
Yeah, so I just have a couple slides, and they are related. So this is me just getting ready to go. And what was kind of cool is the markers on these paths are tremendous. Like they have them all over, you have a marker, and so you don't get lost, right? You see where you're going. So there I am. And this is sort of a typical, what the path looks like. And interestingly, not a lot of trees there on Cornwall, a lot of rocky bluffs, and we did a lot of up and down. And then I thought I would share this because pretty much the antithesis of the naturalized shoreline. So we went into this little village, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at the walls on this place, right? And then I heard when these walls were originally built, they were built, see now I have this down, by prisoners from the Napoleonic Wars built these walls. And so they were built obviously a very long time ago, and this entire village is now been built out, and they've got these walls, right? And it's actually here, you can't tell from this photograph, but this is actually a gate that they can technically, lower it down. So then the next photograph is 2017 with climate change, etc. This is just around the corner. Wow. And that's what's happening with those walls. So that first photograph is sort of over here. So these are the outer walls, and you can see there's considerable fetch that comes up here, and I mean, that's a heck of a wave. Yeah, so obviously the folks in the Napoleonic Wars, after the Napoleonic Wars or during the prisoners, when they were designing these walls, they weren't thinking about what was going to happen in 2017, but I guess when I saw this is a photograph of a photograph, we have to think about these things, like what are the impacts of when we do denaturalize our shorelines by taking out large woody debris, by messing around with those coastal processes. you know, where we can end up.
All
with
that energy from the waves in the sea gets pounded into the buildings, right?
Yep.
So
And-
the walls
and that-
would make it worse, the fact that
The
they-
walls make it worse,
Yeah.
yeah. So the walls make it worse, so we end up with this sort of scenario. And so it's just a bit of a cautionary tale. Yeah, I know.
Because all that energy is going to go down behind and
Underneath, and obviously, it's, I mean, that's almost 2 stories
Yeah.
up to the, it's almost a 2-story wave at that point. Because waves, when they hit the hardened walls, it goes 5 to 10 times the height when it hits a wall. So the wall that it's been hitting, let's do the math, but I actually went to swimming over here. Obviously, it was quite quiet, but we had to sort of go down quite a long set of stairs just to even to get to the beach to go for a swim. But yeah, that was quite something. So that was it, but if you're interested more in Green Shores, you can go to the website there, Green Shores, Stewardship Center Green Shores, and I think that's it.
Great,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you. It was a great trip, even though I had to take pictures of walls and whatnot, you know.
I didn't make her take the pictures of the walls.
Yeah,
I just said
yeah.
she could bring them.
Yeah, you know, I went with it, but I thought the path was amazing, you know, related to this, you know, and I remember chatting with somebody, we're walking along and we're like, this is just amazing, right? You can just walk on these paths and also the protection they have of these paths. We heard that, you know, somebody decided to just build over the path and I didn't hear who the regulator is, but they basically said, you have to take that house down.
Yeah.
Like, you can't do that. You built it, now you gotta take it down because you've gone over the path.
Yeah.
And, but as somebody said to me, they've got 1,200 years of working to get it, and for people
Yeah.
walking along there, right? So, you know, but just having that path and the right of way is something that, like, I have to admit, it was very foresighted of them to actually get it in their planning so that you wouldn't lose the right to be able to walk from place to place. So,
I talked to countless people in the UK who've been here in North America. They said the one thing that they just can't believe is you can't go somewhere. There's a fence, or
Yeah.
there's a no trespassing sign.
yeah.
You know, otherwise you just, off you go in the UK.
Yeah.
Especially
Can I-
Scotland.
In Europe, generally, and the UK specifically, these footpaths are sacrosanct. They're like, they have protection. So if you can show them on a map that's even like hundreds of years old, that there was a footpath there, well, then it's protected, which is completely different from here. And it's not just the local planning department, it's like
Yeah.
a high-level national rule,
Yeah.
and completely different from here. But sometimes even here, we've had municipal councillors who are used to the way it works in Europe, and they say, well, we could let them put up a gate because it's the right of way. And I'm going, well, no, it's not. They'll put up the gate and then they just,
Keep it
it'll
closed.
stop.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
well, I mean,
people don't understand the difference, but it's very different there.
But I mean, farmers do that in England.
Yes.
They're not all terribly keen on having right of way going
Yeah,
through.
That's right.
Put a ball in the field and put a fence up.
I remember vividly, as an 11-year-old, 11-year-old, we went on one of these footpaths and there was a goat, somebody's billy goat,
Yeah.
tethered right in the middle, you know. So we have photos of my dad holding onto the horns and the goat trying to get in, and so we all sneak around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fun and games. But eventually, the footpath has a legal presence.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
which our trails, we're aiming towards that.
That's right, you know, so a bit of inspiration there
Yeah.
to, you know, because it's pretty cool,
Awesome.
so.
You know, I just had a couple of questions. So it says, said that you may need a permit, so when does you?
So if it's buried or partially buried, then you may need a permit.
Okay.
So if it's on top, likely you would not need a permit.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
And the other question I had was, so there's a lot of beaches where you see accumulation of large woody debris, and it's rack, it's stuff
Stuff that's
it's
come off
washed
from
up,
the.
not necessarily stuff that's come
Yeah.
down. But you've noticed that in some places it'll bury itself, it'll start accumulating debris or gravel. So does that offer like protection against wave action? Like, and I'm thinking like in places, because I've seen a few places where we have a trail that goes down to a beach, and in front of the trail, it can be an impediment to accessing the beach, but
Yeah.
there's that large woody debris. Is that protecting that little?
I would say it would be acting more like a wall than I would be acting more like a hardened structure than, yeah. Than, if it's that much, many logs,
Right.
I would say it would be more, so no, we would not be offering protection. Yeah.
That's good, because that's what I was wondering, is the places like September Morn Beach,
Yeah.
or place, any of the beaches where some seasons it's just rock a chalk, and
Yeah.
then a storm comes and takes it all away.
Yeah.
And wonder, there's very little you can do to manage it,
Yeah.
and it's dangerous and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But hearing that it can be somewhere along the range from being protective to being
Yeah.
a wall is helpful.
Yeah, you'd have to take a look at that, and also take a look at, have an understanding of what, what the coastal dynamic is in that particular spot. But generally speaking, if you've got a pile up of, like in September morning, if you've got like a pile up of logs, it's acting more as it would be acting more
So
as
it's
a
making the
house.
situation worse.
Hard
in time
structure.
shape, like.
Yeah,
Battering ram too,
Yeah.
sure.
yeah.
I wonder what it looked like for the logging. What's
Yeah,
the-
I know, that would be.
Because you look
yeah.
at 90+% of all the logs have been sawn.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, it'd be interesting to see if and when the amount of logging changes and the amount of, rafts of logs that get towed down.
Yeah, I think it's already changed. There's not as much as there used to be.
Mhm.
I think maybe it's because they're a little more careful about it. These things are highly valuable.
Because, yeah, they're losing money.
They're more careful.
Mhm.
I mean, because we don't have log salvagers, they can't make a living around here anymore because there's just not enough to salvage, yeah. So,
Yeah.
there we go. Hope it was worth the wait.
Yeah.
I was just going to say thank you for very much for the
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so 7.2, the work plan. So I know.
I printed up 2019, I forgot to.
Can I request, I think I missed the meeting where the parks plan was handed out. Did I miss that? I see you've got a copy of.
I got one. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have one.
Got any
I'll
money?
get you one.
It's slightly
Maybe
new.
you've got markers on it.
Carla's gonna give you one.
Thank you.
I may have this copy in here if you want to use one now, but I'll get you your own. So what?
Oh, it's already in this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
You're just too efficient.
Oh, look at the poor tree.
And here I am.
It's okay, save them for the next one. Yeah.
So this came up because at the last meeting, Terry wanted to speak to the work plan. So I don't know if you had anything specifically, Terry, you wanted to.
Well, I think we have to get ready for the budget process, and money.
Yeah, this is helpful because that's,
We gotta put some stuff in.
For sure, but Terry brought it up at the last meeting.
Oh,
Was that 2020 or 2019?
I just wanted to review it, that's all.
Okay, yeah, good enough, good enough.
Yeah.
This is 19, and
Yeah, okay.
This is,
So and that's
2019.
kind of the first step to preparing our next work plan anyway, is to review what we've done and what we haven't done.
Well, part of this is, you'll see there's things that we had, oh, we did do a bunch of this. Well, that's good. But there's also things that we didn't do because Bonnie wasn't here.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to determine the route of the waterfall trail route, I think that kind of fell away.
Well, we did walk around it, and we thought that it wasn't feasible to be working on it at this time,
Yeah.
because of how steep it was and that kind of thing, so we did the work.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I didn't mean it fell, I mean, yes, we addressed it and.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we just decided that it wasn't, we weren't gonna go on to the step about assess costs of constructing because the feasibility wasn't
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And identify a plan for Chlorine Lake and Hikers Trail linkage, that's underway and happening.
Okay.
So the renaming of Pebble Beach, I mean, I think that's ongoing.
That one,
We're doing a meeting with, the staff meeting about naming policy. So, yeah, working on that one a little bit. We were reaching out to the Scottish Nation before I left, and I don't know where that went. We were hoping to get the elders to come over and.
well, there's been a bunch of things that have happened since you left, mostly community meetings, and sometimes meetings called by the Squamish and Squamish Nation. And the council has decided to invite the elders from the Squamish Nation over to chat, and this could be one of the things that you say we could work together on. And also, the mayor was invited to a blanketing ceremony, so he was blanketed this year. The big canoes came to Tunstall Bay, and so there was a number of people were involved in the blanketing ceremony. And so some of the first steps are being taken, and there's a couple of offers for workshops, including from now the Islands Trust has a senior intergovernmental advisor. That's Lisa Wilcox, who used to work for the Squamish Nation. And now she's with the Islands Trust, and she's our, because we have 35 First Nations in the Islands Trust area, and and we have a First Nations declaration and policy and that kind of thing, so we're trying to do this everywhere. And Lisa is willing to come to Bowen and do a workshop for staff, including planning staff. And so that's out there too. And some of it I just haven't been communicating lately because there's been so much other events happening around the municipality.
Yes. So that's ongoing.
Yep.
Identify beaches with log buildup and create strategy to manage log hazards. We've been kind of working on that.
Well, I think we had part of that today.
Really good, that's what I'm saying.
But wasn't there, I thought Carla, didn't staff, we passed something in this group about making sure there was a laneway so that people could get to the water if it was feasible and safe, right? And that, you did that?
Yeah.
You did that?
We did make a recommendation to council, and then, I don't know if that went to council.
May have.
Either way,
Yeah.
they did the work.
Yeah.
And I think
The public
honestly, there
works
was
does?
already plans to do that work, and so it just got done while it was still going to council and that kind of thing, so.
Okay.
But I think the big point of that recommendation was that staff kind of had a lot of discretion about
Yeah.
that, and that's kind
Okay,
of
it
what
was
we
April
decided.
16th. The council received a letter on March 26th from a member of public requesting that a path be cleared. Therefore, we resolved.
That was the September warrant. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
And that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Turn on.
I didn't know if it was all beaches or.
Council directs staff to create access from the trail to the water on September Moore Beach when at operational staff's discretion is practical and safe to do so, but that large-scale log removal will not be conducted.
Okay.
Because other than that, the park plan has clear guidelines on what beaches are maintained for access. So if a member of the public comes and it goes to council, and then that's a directive like that, then that's sort of one-offs. Other than that, I think operational wise, we just go by what's in the park plan for standards, like which beaches. The reason why we have community beaches is for access.
Well, you know,
But I mean, we could look, I mean, if we did have the manpower, if we had the staffing resources, which are a little bit, you know, it's always lots to do on the island. Yeah, then, you know, we could look at like in the bottom of the stairways, and if there is this buildup, you know, that is causing more erosion, like in a perfect world, that would be fantastic. So I think that the park plan does really outline that, and it's something to point to the public as well, right? That was endorsed by council, and it gives us a guideline.
See, it was only adopted in March 26, 2018, and then, but we're just kind of getting our hands on the hard copy now. So, Bonnie, it's like the year of the parks plan that you were gone has just been kind of suspended, so we haven't really got into it, really. So now you're back, and we can get started on it, because I didn't even realize that that was in here, I'd forgotten, and we haven't been.
We talked about that at the meeting, how different beach classifications have different levels of maintenance.
Yeah.
And
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I also link it to every single agenda.
I know. But it's different having a hard copy that you can put your little tags in, yeah, or whatever. Okay, thank you.
I think in terms of the log buildup and whatnot, you know, and I see it says use Pebbly Beach as a case study, but Pebbly Beach doesn't have a massive log buildup problem, does it?
It did, and they undertook a big removal
Oh, okay.
in 2018, the fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
But not as bad as like September.
It was the
Before I
spring.
left, I think,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
this spring.
Yeah. So, it was huge. I mean, they took tons of logs out. It cost a lot of money to do.
Mhm.
But there was that buildup, and there was access there, was the key, right?
Yeah.
So there was a dump truck, a machine working, and filling up the dump truck took load after load after load. I think up to the yard, and they probably just burned it, because it's not good for anything, right?
No,
Like,
yeah.
that's the
So,
terrible part about it, right, is that it's not useful material anymore once it's been in the salt water. So, I think one of the lessons that they learned from that, because I know Ian and I mean, I guess we have used it as a case study a little bit, but Ian and I went over and we looked at it again. Yeah, and I said, you know, part of what I learned with green tours is that you leave a bit of large woody debris, and then that will slow down the water, and then it looks different at every time of the year, right? So when the water's coming down in the winter, like, it creates this crazy stream there, and it's so much different now that there's no logs that cover it up. And yeah, so the logs have built up again since then, and they also created a bit of a ramp down to the beach and took out the stairs that were there. We took out the stairs a while before, but they did some work there to kind of clean it up, and took out a little bit of the blackberry that was there. And so one of the lessons that we learned, I think, was to leave a little bit more when you were doing clearing like that, like some of the really big stuff that's been there, you know, forever.
yeah, it helps
the
add
idea.
some stability to the,
Mhm.
and natural,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I also think it's not something that we're really gonna plan on doing anyways.
No, and in West Vancouver, like, they have very certain beaches, like Ambleside, they have a few beaches. Those beaches, they do this removal, they budget a lot of money every
Yeah.
year for this removal. So Ambleside, Dundering, John Lawson, I think, are the three year. Anyway, and it's a big, but they've got like a storage yard, and they have an old mill or something. There's some logs are usable. But it's a big thing, and they budget a lot of money. But anything else, any other beach other than those three community beaches, they do not touch, and that's been their operational standard in West End for a long time. Because it does come back. We have to draw the line somewhere. That's, you know, the community beaches. That's why we went through this whole process of the parks plan and being realistic. But there are one-offs. I mean, definitely, you know, probably that was a good case study, right? Because we learned something from that. So, but it wouldn't be an annual thing, I don't think, unless council decides that that's something they want to pursue. But it's not supported by the park plan.
This is interesting. I think that you'll be able to go through this with Carla and catch each other up, put check marks beside them and that kind of thing. Yes. Yeah.
Nice, okay. So the Edwards Bog restoration work, that's ongoing, and you just talked about that. Awesome.
We missed the water access. The beaches and.
So-
Oh, right, yeah.
But that's okay, I mean, we did the walkabout in Miller's Landing.
Yes,
And
yeah.
we made our application.
Mhm.
And so that's just come back to us. I think it took a while to get council, and so I guess
It'll be on the
I'll
next
probably be
agenda.
looking.
It'll be on the next agenda.
What? No. Well, I've
already
already
passed.
got directive.
It's already,
Just
it's
meant
got,
the excerpt from that meeting. the
Oh, will
others.
be,
Oh,
sure, okay.
yeah.
Just
that was-
report back.
Yeah.
I think what Carla means is.
So we're
it's
gonna-
The staff, or council's recommended, pass the recommendation, now it goes back to staff. I think.
So we'll look at that, reinstating Stone. I personally, I don't think it's gonna happen. But
Well,
that's
listen-
just my opinion.
Yeah.
So I think it would be cool to look at the Hood Point Beach maybe instead, because I think that one is a bit more feasible. So that's maybe something else we could work on.
See, the thing about that Ecclestone one is it's reestablishing the beach access that was there up until just a few years ago. And a lot of work's been done by the planning department, you know. And then now the property's changed hands, Fitch, Katie sold the property.
It's just gonna be based on whether, it's not really reinstating a beach access. The beach access is still there. It just crosses private property.
But it's all on private property, the beach access. I mean, the
Uh,
end part.
yeah, just the end part, right?
I
So
mean, you can walk down,
there's
but then
no-
it's a goat trail, like, and I don't know how, it's so complicated because the shoreline's been altered there and there's
I
eventually,
know.
there's that, it's
I know.
such a complicated issue because there's legal implications and easements and road right-of-ways and, yeah,
I
it's a
know,
very
it's just,
complicated one.
it's
yeah.
just,
Yeah.
now, if there's ever an opportunity where that landowner wants something from council, there is a recommendation there, you know? And,
So-
but I just, this is like closing that trail that's still up on the
Mhm.
screen. I'm going,
That's what, you know.
I don't know.
And it's also important to
And I know
note that,
staff did a ton of work to try and reopen, and it's not us that.
And weren't the locals pushing for it?
Yep.
and that was my point, the main thrust of this is, this came from complaints to the committee from members of the public.
Yeah.
But all we can do as a committee is make a recommendation, and
Yeah.
Well, and all I can do as a staff member, when I look into this, is ask the property owner if they're interested in signing, having an easement agreement.
oh, absolutely, I didn't mean that to be a knock at staff.
No, but I'm just saying, that's the next step, and so it's just gonna be, either they wanna let people on their property, or they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And planning staff have done a lot of work, so there's a long history there. Yeah. I don't know what the new property is. Anyway, it's tricky, it's a tricky one.
It might be good, Carla, if you were gonna do it, to consult with the planning department
Oh, yeah.
before, okay? Just because there's all kinds of buildings on our right of way, and it's not our fault. Yes.
And Bonnie, just to bring you up to speed, one of the issues that we had, because the members of the public who complained, their big thing is, we just want signs back up again. And one of the issues that came up with the committee was, well, if you don't control that access, maybe it's a liable issue if you are promoting
Beach
people to go
access.
there. So,
It's pretty dangerous beach access right now because you're just getting a cliff. Maybe you can't go down and walk. But to get to the-
If you
Or-
go down straight,
or you
down.
go down
Yeah,
the
if
stairs.
you actually don't trespass.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway,
Okay, so that's that. So, yeah, let's think about Hood Point then. Headwaters Bog restoration work, so that's ongoing, and that's happening. Dictate Hill Neighborhood Park Project, like, snap. Permanent pit hole location, identification, done. Picnic table location, identification. I don't think we've ever talked about that.
I don't know. there was any money budgeted for picnic tables, but maybe, maybe we could change that, as much as I don't wanna bring up benches again.
No,
But maybe, it's just an idea, though. Do we want to identify the places where we most like to see benches?
I think it would be good for us all to review the parks plan and what, now that it's been a couple of years, you know, since it actually passed, right? And,
I think maybe to what the recommendation before staff is that we look at a park bench policy, so we do that first, and then maybe we can come back to the committee here and sort of brainstorm at a future date. But I think that probably maybe working on the policy first, and yeah, that would just be my. I mean, we could budget for. It seems like in the last few years, anyway, I was budgeting for 1 or 2 benches per year, just because we seem to find places for them. And it definitely supported by the park plan. People want a place to sit.
it would also fit with the active living plan that we just saw in terms of destinations, places, you know, place to walk to. Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get a bench policy in place.
I just sent Mark, I sent some photos around back in the summer, but it was right in the middle of the summer. And because the library had just purchased a bunch of benches. And so they've done the sourcing and anyway, you can see them. I've got more photos of them. And they have arms and they're made of plastic wood. And so I don't know if you ever looked at them as part of this group. Did those photos ever
I
go
don't
to
think
everybody?
it came up in our discussion at the time.
Yeah.
But I do remember, when you sent them to me, I remember that you had sent them around before.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody remembers them. It was like in the middle of July.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if they ever made it into the discussion, but it's kind of like they were doing a bulk order at the library. So
Maybe they made it into the folder.
But I think it'd be really nice to know where we, as a group, maybe, yeah, that's something we could brainstorm and see where we would like to have priority benches over time, because it's supported by the park plan.
Yeah, for sure. I think we've talked about benches to death a little bit, and everyone.
While you were gone.
Just so you know. But one thing that would kept getting mentioned was that if we have people coming in saying, do we want to purchase a bench, memorial bench, that we should probably have a list of spots that we know we want the bench, which we kind of do. I know you and I probably do in our heads a little bit, like, okay, we need one here first and here first, but it might be nice to actually like talk about those all together and come up with a list. And maybe so that we can present that list to the, person who wants to buy a bench, see what they would like.
But this is picnic tables, which are different.
It
Yeah.
is, yeah. I just
I mean-
didn't know if we had any
Well, I
money
mean,
for those.
there's nothing to say you can't suggest an area for a picnic table if one strikes you. Is that in the park plan as well?
Picnic tables, they're mentioned, but more benches.
So, the folks, so I think we're talking about changing that to park benches.
We had dealt with picnic tables at one point. I just remember the absurd cost of something that you could build with some 2x4s, for a minuscule amount, it was into the thousands. And also we talked about it at Seymour Bay, if you remember, having a place there for a picnic table.
yeah, but I think, the idea of family going for a picnic, looking for a picnic table is less nowadays. Whereas people walk and they want to sit and look at a viewpoint. But I was thinking today about, a couple of days ago, about Crippen Regional Park. Back when it was a new park, those picnic tables at the lake were like hot demand. The ones at Killarney Lake, it was like people got there early to get a picnic table. And you hardly ever see them used now,
In the summer, I've seen it. It's
I
nice.
was just going to say, the last few times I've been there, it's been.
Oh, have they?
Yeah.
Okay, obviously I go there in the bad weather.
Yeah,
Which is true.
that's-
Yeah.
Okay,
we're after 9, so let's just kind
Okay.
of, we're almost done. So signage at beach accesses, parks and trails that are not up to date, that's just ongoing. Who would be, like, if we see something, who would we,
Email me, please.
done,
Thank you.
awesome.
It's kind of an ongoing thing. I'm
Yeah,
trying to- There's just little bits here and there. There aren't our new white signs with the mascots. They're those old ugly brown ones. So if you see those, maybe you can take a picture and send me a picture. And
Take a picture.
If you see ugly signs, sorry, I just went on.
Like,
Yes.
any,
Updated brown ones.
no.
Outdated brown.
Yes.
Outdated
Signs.
beach access signs?
All of them. Jackets, parks, trails, any of them.
And assist with identification of preferred locations for new playscapes. Carry on, ongoing, work with the community to determine an appropriate and desired site for a community garden within a community or neighborhood park. I don't think we've addressed that, but we can bring that to the next work
That
plan.
might be good to talk about with whatever's gonna be happening down at the Davies Orchard, right? Because I think
Yeah.
there may be an element of that in
Yeah.
there.
Mhm. Awesome, good idea. Yeah, and assist with parks asset management plan, which I think the municipality is like undertaking already, so.
It's kind of entertaining, so maybe I think that would probably come as a directive from the council if and when it's needed.
We might be able to discuss that. And assist with the development and adoption of a parks bylaw to manage permitted use in parks.
Yeah, that's something that probably will be happening in the next year.
Okay.
Use of parks bylaw.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I think we just actually knocked a bunch of stuff off of our work plan.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we have the park plan now. But if you think of anything between now and our next meeting, yeah, just email Carla and I and.
So a question similar to what I asked with Meg, like when do we want, the 2020 done by, the work plan done by?
Well,
Ideally.
as soon as possible,
Okay.
I mean, the preliminary budget is November 5th, but it might be pushed, it might be a little bit later, but, that's just the beginning, so really as soon as possible.
Okay, so let's say, I know for next meeting, I know the email that I sent around about the office presentation, I would imagine that will happen at our next meeting, that's a pretty important thing.
That's the climate one?
Yes, and that's gonna be a longer one, it's gonna be probably I'm thinking a 45-minute presentation with discussion thing, and maybe for the rest of the meeting, we can just kind of work on plan to work on the work plan. So think about things that we should be doing in the parks, read the park plan, and that's your guide.
So at the back of the park plan, there's this table 21, the implementation table. And so is this the part that we should be looking at more? Yeah.
I mean, really what came out of there was, the trail master plan, for lack of a better word, or term. That was really, really big deal. That's what people really, that's a big initiative out of there. So I don't know whether that will happen in 2020 or, but definitely was a high priority. I think there's high, medium, low, and priorities listed on the table as well.
Short, medium, ongoing.
So yeah, use the park plan to see what our priorities are. And I want to thank everyone for staying with the program.
Yes.
I don't like,
Thank you.
I just have one thing to say. I feel like Terry brought up the work plan so that we could figure out things that we should be working on, not so that we could make next year's work plan. So let's actually do stuff at the next meeting that we just figured out that we still need to do. Is that, am I right?
Because the year's not over. It's still
Exactly.
October.
We're not talking
Right.
about next
Okay.
year. We're talking
Okay.
about, so
Okay.
let's, want to talk about Hook Point Beach maybe next time? Can we do that?
certainly, yeah.
Thanks.
So for next meeting, we're going to talk about Wood Point Beach. Do we need a walkabout before the meeting? We'll look at it.
Anybody want to do that?
There are a bunch of them.
I mean, yeah, which
I'll
one are
make
you
a map.
talking about?
Yeah, make a map.
I'll make a map.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Let me know when you're ready and I'll put around, or you just put around a doodle poll.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Well, I can't direct you to do that. I'll do a doodle poll. You let me know.
Yeah, I can do that pretty quick.
Okay,
Oh,
done.
sorry.
We'll talk. Okay.
Okay.
Can I have a motion to adjourn? Sorry. Can I have a second? I don't need one, let's go. We're done. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.